The courtroom air was sterile, yet heavy, a silence that pressed down like fog. I remember the scent of old wood and polished floors, the shuffle of papers, the echo of heels against marble. A divorce hearing, just another name on the docket to everyone else. But to me, it was the dissection of a life, the autopsy of 7 years that once felt like forever. Then she walked in. Tara, my wife, or at least the woman who once was. She moved like someone who had already won, chin high, smile controlled, her hand resting tenderly on a stomach that was unmistakably pregnant. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt, every sound, the judge's whisper to the clerk, the hum of the ceiling fan, dimmed into nothing but the pulse in my ears. She was pregnant. Her lawyer, Bennett, trailed behind her with the swagger of a man who thought he held a royal flush. When Tara sat, she gave me a small, knowing smile, the kind meant to say, checkmate. Then she placed a protective hand on her belly. The gesture was theatrical, almost saintly. And with that one movement, she shifted the entire energy of the room. The sympathy, the subtle pity, the judge's softened expression, all tilted in her favor. Her lawyer rose. "Your Honor," he began smoothly. "Before we proceed, I must bring to your attention a recent development." He turned to Tara with performative gravity. "Mrs. Harmon is expecting. This naturally changes the financial considerations in this case." The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly, her pen pausing mid-air. "Expecting?" Bennett nodded, voice rich with practiced indignation. "Indeed, Your Honor. Mr. Harmon has been attempting to divest himself of financial and emotional responsibility, not only to his wife, but now to his unborn child." The words hit like a slap. Unborn child, abandonment, irresponsibility. In a matter of seconds, I had been painted as the villain in a story I didn't write. I looked at Tara. She wasn't crying. She didn't need to. Her silence did more damage than any accusation. Her eyes were steady, almost kind. That was the most terrifying part. The judge turned toward me. "Mr. Harmon, were you aware of this pregnancy?" Before I could speak, Bennett cut in, his tone righteous. "Your Honor, Mr. Harmon was informed. He knew. And this," he gestured toward me, "this entire divorce is an attempt to abandon his responsibilities as a father." Lies, layered on lies. My lawyer, Sam, scribbled something on a notepad and whispered, "Stay calm. Don't react." But calm was impossible. The room was spinning with disbelief, rage, and something deeper. The hollow ache of realizing that the person you once loved now stood ready to destroy you. For a few seconds, I considered silence. Let them speak. Let the farce unfold. But then something in me, a small burning thread of truth, refused to be suffocated. I stood. "Your Honor," I said, my voice trembling but clear, "with all due respect, I've had a vasectomy since 2018. The words hit the room like thunder. Silence followed. Not confusion, but disbelief so deep it bordered on awe. Tara's smile froze, her expression cracking in slow motion. It was like watching a mask peel away. Her lawyer turned to her, eyes wide. "Is that true?" he hissed, though the microphone carried it faintly across the room. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I have medical documentation," I continued, steady now. "Procedure performed August 10th, 2018 by Dr. Levinson at Mercy Medical Center. 2 post-procedure sperm analyses confirming sterility. The decision was made after genetic counseling due to my hereditary condition." The judge motioned for the bailiff. She flipped through the documents in silence. Every page turn sounded like a drumbeat. Finally, she looked up. "These appear legitimate," she said quietly. Her tone had changed, colder, clinical. "Mrs. Harmon, were you aware of this procedure?" Tara's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, with a weak laugh that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "He never told me. He couldn't have." I met her gaze. "It doesn't affect intimacy," I said softly. "Only fertility. And yes, we were intimate, months after the procedure." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Somewhere in the back, someone shifted uncomfortably. Her lawyer turned crimson. "Your Honor, we request a brief recess." "Granted," the judge replied curtly. 15 minutes. As Tara and Bennett retreated to the far end of the room, I finally sat down. My hands were shaking. Sam leaned in and muttered, "You could have warned me." "I didn't know she'd do this," I whispered back. He sighed, half relieved, half furious. You realize you just turned this entire case upside down, right? I nodded. She wanted to use a child, someone else's child, as a weapon. He stared at me, then shook his head. I've seen nasty divorces before, but this, his voice trailed off. As I looked toward the corner where Tara stood whispering urgently with her lawyer, a strange calm settled over me. Maybe it was adrenaline, or maybe it was the realization that truth, no matter how painful, had power. I thought of all the nights I'd spent questioning myself, whether I'd been too cold, too cautious, too unwilling to compromise. In that courtroom, surrounded by strangers and legal jargon, all of that vanished. She wasn't fighting for love. She was fighting for control, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was relieved. When the recess ended, Tara's face was pale, her eyes bloodshot. Her lawyer's tone had changed from confident to conciliatory. He began to stammer about miscommunications and emotional distress. The judge's patience was gone. "Counselor," she said sharply, "attempting to mislead this court regarding paternity is a serious matter. I suggest you advise your client accordingly." Tara's hands were trembling now. The mask had fallen completely. As the gavel struck to adjourn, I felt a strange sense of mourning, not for the marriage, but for the illusion I'd lived inside for so long. When you love someone, you build an entire world around the idea of who they are. You defend it, you feed it, even when cracks appear, until one day the light hits differently, and you see the truth, the ruin beneath the paint. That day in court, the world I built around Tara collapsed, and somewhere, beneath the rubble, I felt something like freedom. Before that courtroom scene, before the lies and the silence and the hollow sound of the gavel, there was us, Tara and me, a love story that once looked picture perfect from the outside. We met in 2013, two ambitious 20-somethings in a downtown coffee shop, both trying to build our futures from scratch. She was a rising star in corporate marketing. I was knee-deep in software development. We clicked instantly. Two people who talked about someday like it was already waiting for us. We married a year later, in 2014. The ceremony was small but elegant, the kind of event that photographs well, where everything looks softer through a filter of champagne and fairy lights. I remember thinking, this is it, this is home. The first few years were good, great even. We traveled, renovated a little house in the suburbs, built a life that looked like success from every angle. Tara had this infectious drive. She could talk for hours about career goals, marketing trends, or where we'd go next summer. I admired that about her. We were partners in the truest sense, or so I believed. Looking back now, I think about how many couples start out that way. Perfect symmetry in dreams, until time begins to bend them apart. There's a line in a documentary I once watched about marriage that stuck with me. Most relationships don't die from lack of love, but from unspoken expectations. That line could have been written about us. At first, our expectations matched. We wanted the same things: financial security, travel, no rush for kids. We both saw parenthood as something optional, maybe one day, when the timing felt right. But life doesn't always honor timelines. The turning point came in early 2017, the year everything changed. I'd been having strange symptoms, occasional numbness in my hands, slight imbalance when walking, tingling in my legs after long days. At first, I brushed it off as stress, but when it worsened, I went to see a neurologist. That visit shattered me. I still remember the sterile smell of the exam room, the hum of fluorescent lights, the neurologist's calm, measured tone as he explained the results. A hereditary neuropathy, 50% chance of transmission to biological children. In that moment, my world shrank to a single sentence. 50%. Half a chance that my child, our child, would inherit the same illness that had turned my father into a ghost of himself before he was 50. When I left that office, I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at the steering wheel, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the world. I was 36, too young to think about wheelchairs, too old to ignore the future. That night, I told Tara everything. I laid it all out: the diagnosis, the genetic risk, the prognosis. My voice cracked when I said I didn't want to pass this down. I still remember her eyes filling with tears as she reached across the table and squeezed my hands. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "You come first. Always." And I believed her. For months afterward, we were closer than ever. We researched adoption agencies, talked about fostering, even discussed the idea of remaining child-free. We spent weekends with our nieces and nephews, and every time I saw Tara laughing with them, part of me ached. But I thought we were aligned. I thought love and reason were enough. Statistically, around 30% of couples face infertility or genetic complications that make having biological children risky. You read those numbers, but you never think you'll be in them. And if you are, you think your love will rise above it. But the truth is, biology speaks louder than vows sometimes. By the spring of 2018, I started noticing small shifts in Tara's behavior. At first, it was subtle. She'd linger near strollers at the mall, stop to coo over strangers' babies. Then I started finding fertility clinic brochures tucked into magazines, articles about medical breakthroughs left open on her tablet. When I'd ask about it, she'd smile tightly and say, "Just reading." But one night, she stopped pretending. We were in the middle of an argument, one of those quiet, exhausted ones that start small but end up reopening every wound. "You're denying me a chance at motherhood," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're making this decision for both of us." I tried to stay calm. "Tara, it's not a choice. It's a risk I can't take. We talked about this. Adoption, fostering. Why isn't that enough?" "Because it's not the same," she snapped, throwing a brochure onto the bed. "I want to feel it. The pregnancy, the heartbeat, the bond. I want a child that's part of us." There was no winning that argument. I remember the way her voice broke on the word us, like love alone could rewrite genetics. That night, we slept back to back. The silence between us felt heavier than any fight we'd ever had. Over the next few months, the distance grew. She became withdrawn, unpredictable. I'd come home to find her watching birthing videos online or researching embryo screening tests that weren't even fully reliable. I tried to reason with her, but reason had lost its footing. At the time, I thought she was just desperate, scared that life was moving too fast. I didn't know then that desperation, when mixed with entitlement, can become something dangerous. The marriage that once felt like a shared dream was slowly turning into a quiet battlefield. And somewhere between love and fear, Tara had already started planning her next move, one that would cross a line I could never uncross. I used to believe that every problem could be solved with logic, that if you presented the facts clearly enough, people would understand, would choose empathy over emotion. But diseases don't negotiate, and neither, as I'd learn, does denial. After my diagnosis, the word hereditary began to echo through every part of my life. It wasn't just medical anymore. It was existential. The disease, polycystic neuropathy, attacks the nerves slowly. It starts with numbness, then weakness, then paralysis. I'd watched it take my father. A proud, brilliant man reduced to watching the world from a chair. His mind sharp, but his body fading. I'd spent my 20s and 30s terrified of becoming him. Now that fear had shape. A clinical report, a list of probabilities, a countdown I couldn't read. When I told Tara, I expected her to run. Instead, she stayed. She cried with me. She promised we'd take it one step at a time. That night, we lay on the couch in silence, the TV flickering against the wall, her fingers tracing idle circles on my wrist. For the first time, I believed we might actually make it through. For a while, we did. She came to my doctor's appointments, helped me track symptoms, even joined a genetic counseling session. I thought that kind of support meant unbreakable love. But love under pressure can warp in ways you don't expect. It began subtly. Her questions started to change. At first, she asked how to manage the disease. Then it was about the genetic odds. Could gene therapy help? Were there ways to filter embryos? Could science fix what fate had broken? I tried to answer with honesty. The testing isn't perfect, I'd say. And even if it were, I don't want to roll those dice. She'd go quiet then, looking away, and I could see the disappointment building behind her calm. A few weeks later, I found a pamphlet tucked into the pages of our shared planner, Fertility Solutions for Couples with Genetic Risk Factors. It was filled with promises, smiling doctors, perfect babies, statistics that made risk look like choice. That's when I started to realize Tara wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the life she thought she deserved. I don't blame her entirely. Society has a way of wrapping motherhood around a woman's identity, like it's her birthright. There's this invisible clock, social, biological, cultural, that ticks louder every year after 30. And for women like Tara, who built their worth on achievement and control, the idea of losing that narrative must have felt unbearable. But what she did next wasn't about biology. It was about betrayal. It started with subtle changes in our intimacy. I'd notice open condom wrappers missing from the box, even when I hadn't been home. Once, I found her calendar with notes about her cycle. When I asked, she brushed it off as health tracking. I wanted to believe her. You always want to believe the person you love. Then came July 2018. I was looking for a work receipt on our shared laptop when I stumbled across her browser history. At first it was mundane. Shopping links, Pinterest boards. But then I saw a tab labelled Conceiving Without Partner's Consent. Advice Forum. My heart stopped. I clicked it open, hands trembling. Post after post spilled out. How to poke tiny holes in condoms. How to skip birth control pills without notice. How to track ovulation. Secretly, my stomach turned to ice when I found her username replying to someone suggesting she get him drunk so he wouldn't notice. Her reply read, "That might work. He rarely remembers details when he drinks whiskey." I sat there for hours reading everything. Messages, replies, her desperate tone blending manipulation with self-pity. It wasn't just deceit, it was premeditation. When she came home that evening, I confronted her. I remember standing in the living room, the glow from the TV flickering across her face. "What is this, Tara?" I demanded, showing her the screen. Her face went pale, then hardened. "You went through my computer." "You were trying to trap me into fatherhood," I said, my voice breaking. "Do you have any idea what that means?" "You're overreacting," she said, pacing. "I was just venting. I'd never actually do it." But her voice wavered. "You asked strangers online how to trick me," I said, louder now. "That's not venting. That's betrayal." That's when she broke down. She sank onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm desperate, Drew," she said between breaths. "I'm 35. My body is running out of time. You keep saying no, and I keep waiting for you to change your mind. You'll love the baby once it's here. I know you will." Her words chilled me more than the deceit itself. It wasn't malice, it was conviction. She genuinely believed that violating my trust was justified by her dream. That night, I slept in the guest room. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, replaying every moment of our marriage, every promise, every laugh, trying to find the place where love had turned into obsession. In the morning, I made a decision. I called my doctor and scheduled a vasectomy consultation. Not out of anger, but out of survival. There's a strange shame that comes with taking control of your own body as a man. Society rarely talks about it. The stigma, the silence. But that day I didn't care. I couldn't risk being tricked into fatherhood, not when the stakes were life-altering. The doctor was understanding. He'd seen situations like mine before. Genetic fear mixed with betrayal. The procedure was simple, sterile, and mercifully quick. Tara thought I was working on a project deadline that weekend. She never knew. Afterward, I told myself I'd explain everything. That once the emotions cooled, we could talk about trust, therapy, maybe even forgiveness. But before I could, she blindsided me. "I think we should separate," she said one evening, her tone almost rehearsed. "I've talked to a divorce attorney." Just like that. I remember staring at her across the dinner table, the taste of cold food on my tongue, realizing that I didn't know this person anymore. She said she couldn't waste her fertile years on someone who wouldn't change his mind. The irony was bitter. She left me over a child. I could never have given her, even if I'd wanted to. I didn't tell her about the vasectomy then. It felt pointless. I thought that chapter of our lives had closed. I was wrong, because the real story, the one that would take me all the way back to that courtroom, was just beginning. After Tara left, silence filled the house like fog. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that seeps into your lungs until every breath feels heavy. Divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, clean, emotionless, written in a language that turned love into property and years into bullet points. I signed them without fighting. I told myself it was mercy, that letting go was the only way to stop the bleeding. But the truth is, I wasn't ready to stop hoping. For months, I went through the motions. Work, sleep, repeat. The only proof she'd ever been there were the faint perfume traces on the pillows and her shoes still by the door. I couldn't bring myself to move them. Then, about 7 months after she left, Tara called. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Not sharp or defensive, just tired. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed no, but something in her tone, the kind of brokenness that doesn't sound rehearsed, made me agree. We met at a small cafe halfway between our places. She looked thinner, paler, her makeup lighter than usual. When she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. I thought I could move on. "I can't." I didn't answer at first. I just watched her stir her coffee. 1 sugar, no milk, the same as always. "I've been seeing a therapist," she continued. I was angry, at life, at the situation. I blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. I wanted to believe her, I really did. There's something about being loved once, truly loved, that makes forgiveness come too easily. So, after weeks of cautious talks, I let her back in. It started small, weekend visits, dinner once or twice. Eventually, she moved back in. We promised each other honesty this time. We even talked about couples therapy. I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. For almost a year, things seemed normal. We traveled again, laughed, shared inside jokes. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with that old warmth, and for a moment, I'd forget the damage. But even peace can be camouflage. It began with her new job, a marketing executive role at a major firm. Long hours, frequent client dinners, late-night texts from her boss, Aaron. I'd heard the name enough to grow used to it. At first, I didn't think twice. Then the small inconsistencies started. She'd come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. Her phone would light up at midnight, and she'd turn it face down. When I'd ask, she'd smile, too quickly, and say, "Work emergency." I wanted to trust her. After everything, I thought she'd earned at least that much. Then one evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed again. Reflex, not curiosity, made me glance. A preview flashed across the screen. Aaron. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You drive me insane." The world seemed to tilt. My stomach dropped. I unlocked her phone, not with guilt, but with resignation. Dozens of messages spilled out like a confession. Months of flirtation, secret lunches, hotel receipts. They'd been together almost since the day she'd moved back. One message froze me completely. "Tara, he has no idea. I think I'm finally pregnant." Pregnant. The word felt foreign, heavy, dangerous. My hands started shaking as I scrolled. She was ecstatic. She'd told Aaron it was our little miracle. I stood in the bathroom doorway, the sound of the shower muffled behind the glass. She was humming. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I needed proof, time, clarity. Something that made sense in a life that suddenly didn't. That night, I slept on the couch, pretending I'd fallen asleep watching TV. I stared at the ceiling until morning, numb. The next day, I went to see my lawyer. I told him everything. The messages, the betrayal, the pregnancy. He listened silently, then said the one thing I'll never forget. "Do not react emotionally. Keep records. We'll handle this cleanly." 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Again. When the papers arrived, Tara exploded. "You're overreacting," she yelled. "You don't even know if it's—" "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't finish that sentence." Her face crumpled, rage giving way to tears. "You don't understand," she said. "It just happened. I needed to feel alive again. You were distant. I thought you didn't want me anymore." "I didn't want a child," I said quietly. "That's not the same as not wanting you." But it didn't matter. The damage was irreversible. That night, she packed a bag and left. Weeks passed. We communicated only through lawyers. Then, one morning, I received an official court notice. Contested divorce hearing, spousal support and asset division. The day of the hearing, Tara walked into the courtroom radiant, glowing, confident, visibly pregnant. Every whisper in the room seemed to stop when she smiled at me. Her attorney stood up first, declaring that she was carrying the respondent's child and that her client sought spousal and child support based on that fact. The judge raised an eyebrow. My own lawyer looked at me, and in that silence, everything I'd been holding in, the anger, the disbelief, the pain, condensed into one simple truth. I stood up slowly. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm, "I'd like to submit medical documentation showing that I underwent a vasectomy in 2018. The entire room went still. Tara's smile collapsed. Her lawyer blinked, visibly thrown off. The judge leaned forward. Is that accurate? He asked. Yes, I said, placing the sealed envelope on the desk. The child she's carrying cannot be mine. It was the quietest sound I've ever heard, the sound of a life unraveling in real time. For a moment, Tara looked like she might faint. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, as if to protect what she'd built on a lie. The judge ordered a recess. Her attorney turned to her, whispering harshly. She couldn't speak, just stared at me, eyes wide, tears pooling but not falling. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Because truth, once revealed, doesn't need to shout. It simply stands, undeniable and still. When the judge called for recess that morning, I remember how time seemed to slow. The walls of the courtroom pulsed with whispers. The shuffle of papers, the faint hum of disbelief, the collective intake of breath that always follows public humiliation. Tara didn't move at first. She just stood there, one hand on her stomach, her lips trembling as if trying to form words that no longer mattered. Her attorney leaned close, whispering something urgent. I didn't catch it. What I did catch was the flicker in her eyes, a mix of shock, panic, and a dawning realization that the mask she'd been wearing for months had finally cracked. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "This isn't true," she said. "He's lying." I turned to face her, steady. "Would you like me to authorize a DNA test right now?" Her silence was the loudest answer in the room. The judge cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and spoke with the clinical detachment of someone who's seen too many versions of heartbreak. "Given the new evidence, the court will adjourn this session. Counsel, I recommend both parties review the documentation before we reconvene." And just like that, it was over. Or at least, the performance was. Outside the courtroom, Tara tried to approach me. Her steps were uneven, her face pale. "Drew, please. You don't understand," she began. "I didn't stop walking." "No," I said quietly. "I understand perfectly. For the first time, I actually do." She reached out, grabbing my sleeve. Her voice broke. "It's not what you think." I turned to her, met her eyes, the same eyes I'd once trusted with everything. "You're right," I said. "It's worse." Then I walked away. Over the next few weeks, the story unraveled in public and private. Her lawyer withdrew from the case within days. Aaron, her boss, her lover, stopped answering her calls once he found out about the pregnancy and the vasectomy revelation. He was married too, as it turned out. A quiet scandal began brewing in their company, and soon she lost her job. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt empty. There's no victory in proving betrayal. You don't win. You just stop losing. A few nights later, I got a call I didn't expect. It was her sister, Erin. Her voice was shaky, caught between anger and guilt. "She's not eating," she said. "She's a mess. She keeps saying she didn't mean for any of this to happen." "I don't know what you want me to say," I replied. "I just thought you should know," Erin said. She told me everything. About Erin, about the pregnancy, about the lies. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "She said she still loves you." I almost laughed, but it came out as a sigh. "She loves the version of me that would forgive this," I said. "That man doesn't exist anymore." After that, I didn't hear from her for months. The case moved forward without drama. The paternity test confirmed what everyone already knew. The divorce was finalized quietly. No media, no spectacle, just paperwork. Still, in the months that followed, I found myself haunted not by anger, but by why. Why someone would risk everything, dignity, trust, even self-respect, for control over a narrative. It took therapy to understand that it wasn't about me. It never really was. People like Tara don't lie because they hate you. They lie because they can't face who they've become. The truth threatens the image they've built. The perfect partner, the perfect life, the perfect story. And when reality doesn't fit, they rewrite it. The final hearing came 6 months later. She looked smaller somehow. No makeup, her hair tied back, eyes swollen. I almost didn't recognize her. She stood when the judge entered, hands clasped tightly in front of her. When the judgment was read, no child support, no alimony, division of assets in my favor. She didn't argue. She just nodded, As I was leaving, she called out my name softly. Drew? I stopped at the door but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. There are apologies that can't reach the places they're meant to heal. So I just nodded once and walked away for the last time. The months after the divorce were quiet. For the first time in years, my life was truly mine. No secrets, no hidden motives, just silence and the slow, steady work of rebuilding. I sold the house we'd shared, moved into a small apartment downtown, took up cycling again. My hands still go numb sometimes, the disease reminding me that it's still there. A quiet shadow in the background. But I've learned to live with it, the way you learn to live with scars. Every morning, I wake up to sunlight spilling through the curtains and make coffee in the same chipped mug I've had for 10 years. Some mornings I think about her, not with anger, but with a kind of distant gratitude. Because without the lies, I might never have learned what peace actually feels like. Truth isn't glamorous. It doesn't explode or sparkle, it just exists. It sits quietly in your chest, like steady breathing after a long run. Unremarkable, but pure. Sometimes I still see couples on park benches, laughing, holding hands, making plans. I don't envy them. I just hope they understand what they have before they lose it. And on the rare nights when I think about Tara, her smile, her ambition, the way she once looked at me like I was the whole sky, I whisper something I mean with all my heart. I forgive you, but I'll never go back. After the court's final decision, there was a silence in my life that didn't feel like peace at first. It felt like the aftermath of an explosion, the kind where the ringing in your ears lingers long after the smoke clears. In the days that followed, Tara's calls stopped. The endless stream of messages, alternating between rage, guilt, and desperate pleas, went quiet. It was eerie at first. I had gotten used to her digital ghost haunting my phone, but soon that quiet became the first real taste of freedom I'd had in years. Then, 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected knock at my door. When I opened it, Tara's sister, Erin, stood there. She looked tired, older than I remembered. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a folder to her chest. I'm sorry to show up like this, she began, her voice trembling. But you deserve to know what's been happening. She stepped inside and sat on the edge of the couch as if afraid to take up space. She's not well, she said quietly. After the court hearing, she completely broke down. She moved back to our parents' place. She's still pregnant, due in a few weeks. Mark, he's gone, transferred overseas. He hasn't spoken to her since that day in court. I stayed silent, not sure what to feel. Erin continued. She told me everything, Drew. Every single lie. The affair, the pregnancy plan. The way she tried to use the baby to trap you during the divorce. She said she thought if she could prove you were the father, she'd be safe. That somehow you'd come back, her voice cracked then. She said she thought love could be forced if it came from the right place. I shook my head slowly. Love that needs to be forced isn't love. It's fear wearing a disguise. Erin nodded, tears in her eyes. You always said that. I just wish she'd listened. That night, after she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the folder she'd left behind. Inside were medical bills, prenatal reports, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. It wasn't sealed. I didn't open it, not that night. The truth is, I didn't want to hear more apologies or explanations. Some words can't undo what's been done. They only reopen wounds that are trying to heal. But a few days later, curiosity got the better of me. The letter wasn't long, maybe 3 pages. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places. Drew, it began. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I just couldn't accept losing the version of us I'd built in my head. I thought if I could hold on to the dream, the house, the family, the life we planned, then everything broken inside me would finally make sense again. I thought love could fix it, but I see now, it only buried the truth deeper. She wrote about her fear of aging, of being childless, of feeling invisible in a world that measures women by motherhood. She confessed that when she saw me making peace with my diagnosis, she felt jealous. Jealous that I could accept something she couldn't control, and then, the final line hit me harder than anything else. I'm sorry for turning my fear into your punishment. I folded the letter carefully and put it away. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. 2 months later, a mutual friend texted me that Tara had given birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Eli, the name we'd once chosen together, back when love was still simple. I sat with that for a while, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Maybe both. She had what she wanted now, a child. But at what cost? I heard later that she'd moved back in with her parents full-time. Mark continued to send financial support, but refused contact. Her career was gone, her reputation in tatters. She was a single mother in her late 30s, trying to rebuild a life on the ashes of her own choices. And me, for the first time in years, I was truly rebuilding, but from a place of truth. I'd started treatment for my neuropathy at a specialist clinic downtown. My doctor, a calm, practical man named Dr. Kaplan, told me there were experimental therapies showing promise. It's not a cure, he said, but it's hope. Hope, a word I'd almost forgotten how to hold. Through the clinic, I joined a support group for people living with hereditary conditions. People like me. People who'd chosen not to have biological children because they refused to pass on their pain. For the first time, I wasn't explaining or defending my choice. I was just understood. One woman, Anna, shared something that stuck with me. Legacy isn't DNA, she said. It's the kindness you leave behind, the people you heal, not the ones you create. I remember writing that down after the meeting, reading it again later that night, letting it sink in. Because for so long, I'd defined my worth by what I couldn't give. Children, a normal family, a future without illness. But maybe that was never the point. Maybe life isn't about legacy in the way we're taught. Maybe it's about integrity, about living in alignment with what you believe, even when the cost is everything. 6 months after the birth, I ran into Erin again at a cafe. She told me Tara was doing better, calmer, softer somehow. Motherhood had humbled her, forced her to face herself. She doesn't talk about Mark anymore, Erin said. She just focuses on Eli, says he's the only thing keeping her sane. I nodded. Good, maybe that's enough. Erin smiled faintly. She said you were right about everything. About honesty, about peace, about love. I didn't reply. There are some truths people can only learn after losing everything. When Erin left, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the rain fall on the street outside. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't grief or anger. It was acceptance. Life doesn't always give you the ending you want, but sometimes it gives you the one you need, and that's enough. The hardest part of starting over wasn't the loneliness. It was the quiet. For 7 years, my life had been filled with constant noise. Conversation, conflict, compromise. Now, the only sound that greeted me when I came home was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the city outside my apartment window. At first, the silence felt like punishment, but over time I started to realize that silence isn't empty. It's full of answers you couldn't hear before. I began small, simple routines, morning walks before the city woke, cooking my own meals again instead of eating out or ordering in, repainting old furniture I'd salvaged from the house I once shared with Tara. Not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. One morning, as I was sanding down the legs of an old oak table, I noticed the faint carving underneath, D+T, 2015. It stopped me cold for a moment. The kind of moment where memories come flooding back, whether you invite them or not. Our first home, our first project together, the smell of paint and laughter and promises we believed were unbreakable. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I kept sanding until the initials disappeared, leaving behind a smooth, blank surface. A clean slate. That table sits in my dining room now, no longer a symbol of what was lost, but of what was reclaimed. Therapy helped too. My therapist, a woman named Lillian, had this way of asking questions that sliced straight through my defenses. Drew, she said once, have you considered that maybe you didn't just lose something? Maybe you were saved from something that wasn't meant for you. It hit me harder than I expected, because deep down, I'd been carrying guilt. Guilt for not wanting children. Guilt for getting the vasectomy. Guilt for not saving a marriage that was already burning from the inside out. But Lillian was right. Some endings are disguised as mercy. There's a quiet kind of grace in letting things fall apart when they need to. Around that same time, I began volunteering at a local support center that worked with people living with chronic illness. I started by organizing events, but before long, I found myself leading group discussions. It was humbling, listening to others share stories of pain, resilience, and acceptance. Stories that reminded me I wasn't alone in navigating the fragility of the human body, or the fear that comes with it. One man, Rob, said something that stayed with me. You can't control what your body does to you, but you can control how honest you are about it. That honesty, it's the only power we really have left. Honesty. That word again. It kept following me like a mantra, because dishonesty, in all its subtle forms, had been the quiet poison in my marriage. Not just Tara's lies, but my own silences, the truths I avoided to keep the peace, the moments I swallowed my boundaries to protect her comfort. In trying to be the good husband, I'd forgotten how to be an honest man. So I made a promise to myself. Never again. Never another half-truth. Never another silence dressed as kindness. As the months passed, my health stabilized. The treatment was working better than expected, slowing the progression of my neuropathy. I still had bad days, moments when my hands trembled, or my legs felt like they were full of sand. But I learned to pace myself, to listen to my body instead of resenting it. And somewhere along the way, life started to feel beautiful again. Not in the cinematic way, not in grand gestures or perfect sunsets, but in quiet, almost invisible ways. The weight of a coffee mug in my hand, the laughter of strangers on a park bench, the way rain sounds when it hits the roof during the early hours of the morning. When you've been through loss, beauty feels sharper somehow, like the world is constantly whispering, "You're still here. Don't waste it." About a year after the divorce was finalized, I got a message from Erin. It was short. She wanted me to tell you, the baby's walking now. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, imagining that little boy toddling through a sunlit living room, his mother watching from the couch, exhaustion and love mixed in her eyes. Maybe she found her peace too. Maybe, in a way, we both did. Later that evening, I replied, "Tell her I wish them both well." And I meant it. Sometimes people think healing means forgetting. It doesn't. Healing is remembering differently. It's looking back and no longer feeling like your chest is on fire. It's being able to say, yes, that happened. And it shaped me, but it doesn't define me. The past doesn't disappear. It just loses its power to hurt you. That summer, I took a solo trip, something I'd always wanted to do. I went to Oregon's coastline, where the cliffs drop into the ocean like something carved by time itself. Standing there, watching the waves crash against the rocks, I thought about everything that had brought me here. The love, the betrayal, the courtroom revelation, the illness, the silence after, and I realized something simple, something liberating. I survived it. Not just the marriage, but the loss of the version of myself that needed other people's approval to feel whole. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. The wind was sharp that day, carrying the salt of the sea. I closed my eyes, breathed in deep and let it all go. Everything I couldn't control, everything I couldn't fix, everything I no longer needed to carry. When I opened my eyes again, the world felt new. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I used to think truth was something you either had or didn't, a line in the sand between honesty and deceit. But I've learned that truth is more like water. It seeps through cracks, reshapes the terrain, and eventually finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. The truth of who I was, the truth of who Tara became, the truth of what our love really meant. It all surfaced eventually, not to punish, but to set us free. Freedom. That's a word I used to misunderstand. I thought freedom was walking away, starting over, cutting ties. But real freedom isn't escape. It's understanding. It's the quiet confidence that comes when you no longer need to rewrite your past to make peace with it. I spent years living in half-truths. The truth I told Tara about wanting a simple life, and the half I didn't say, that I feared passing down the same pain I carried in my body. The truth she told about wanting a family, and the half she didn't say, that she wanted to fix her own brokenness by creating something new. Neither of us were villains. We were just human, desperate for permanence in a world that refuses to stay still. One evening, about 2 years after the divorce, I was walking home from the clinic when I saw a young couple across the street. They were arguing. Not loudly, but with that mix of exhaustion and love that people have when they're still trying. She said something, and he reached for her hand, and for a moment, she let him. Then she pulled away. It was such a small, ordinary scene, but it felt like watching a reflection of my past, like time looping back to remind me of how fragile love can be when honesty slips through your fingers. I didn't feel anger or sadness, just understanding. Maybe that's what growth really is, not forgetting your pain, but outgrowing your need to relive it. Lillian once told me, truth without compassion is cruelty. Compassion without truth is delusion. Real peace only exists where both meet. That line stuck with me, so I started practicing it, not just in how I spoke to others, but in how I spoke to myself. When my legs went numb on bad days, I didn't curse my body anymore. I thanked it for carrying me this far. When I felt the ache of loneliness, I didn't fill it with distractions. I sat with it until it softened into stillness. When I thought of Tara, I didn't see betrayal anymore. I saw a woman who loved me the only way she knew how, imperfectly, but sincerely, in her own broken way. And when I thought of Eli, the child that could have been mine, but wasn't, I felt something close to gratitude. Because even though his existence came from deceit, he was still an innocent, living reminder that something good can emerge from the wreckage of bad choices. Maybe that's the quiet mercy of life. It keeps creating beauty in places you thought were ruined. A few months ago, I got another letter. It was from Tara. No drama this time, no desperation, just a few lines written in careful script. Drew, I wanted you to know that Eli's starting school soon. He's healthy, he's kind. He laughs like you did when you used to talk about the ocean. I've told him the truth, not the ugly version, not the fairy tale, just the truth. Thank you for teaching me what that really means. T. I read it twice, smiled faintly, and placed it in the same folder as the first letter, the one she'd written when everything was falling apart. Same pen, different person. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Some stories don't end with closure. They end with understanding. That night, I walked down to the pier and watched the tide roll in. The air was cool, the sky washed in muted blues and silver. There's something poetic about the ocean, how it's always changing but always there. It erases footprints, but never the feeling of having stood on the shore. I thought about everything truth had cost me, and everything it had given me back. Peace, clarity, freedom, the kind that doesn't roar. It whispers, the kind that doesn't demand forgiveness. It just exists quietly, like the tide. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that truth doesn't protect you from pain. It invites it in, strips away your illusions, and forces you to face yourself. But in doing so, it also rebuilds you, slowly, honestly, beautifully. And when it's done, what remains isn't the same person you were before. It's someone truer, someone who doesn't flinch from reality, but walks alongside it. Someone free.